Good afternoon and welcome to the Lynas Corporation Investor and Analyst Briefing. Amanda Lacaze, CEO and Managing Director, will present today's briefing, and she is joined by Andrew Arnold, General Counsel and Company Secretary. Amanda.
Hi, Renee, and good morning, everybody. Renee said good afternoon, but for those of us in Malaysia, it's good morning. Also with me, Paul LaRue, our Head of Marketing and Sales, and Gavin Sturzenegger, our CFO, as well as Andrew. So I'll just say a few words. I'm sure there are many questions that people have, but I'll start by saying that we're delighted that the announcement by the Malaysian government yesterday, the AELB specifically, that we have our licence renewed and we have a clear pathway to continuing operations. The elements and the conditions associated with the announcement are consistent with the Pakatan Harapan's Executive Review Committee, whose report was released on the 4th of December last year. And it shows that the Malaysian government has taken a science-based approach to the renewal of the licence. For us, as we have said since the 5th of December, we are confident to meet the conditions which were recommended by the expert scientists on the Executive Review Committee. The only addition to the recommendations is the relocation of cracking and leaching to Western Australia, which we have already announced as part of our Lynas 2025 growth plan. And I think that is important to recognise that, we're talking about a business which is a growth business. We're exposed to significant growth markets, and that this opportunity gives us this announcement yesterday gives us the opportunity to execute those plans, which are about continuing to grow value within our business. As you will have seen, the licence has been renewed for 6 months based upon us meeting these conditions, one of which includes a 4-year condition. And so whilst we may have preferred a longer licence, for example, a 3 or a 4-year licence with a 6-month condition, the effect is essentially the same, because under either structure there will be an administrative application for renewal within that at that 6-month stage. As I said, we're very pleased. It affirms a science-based approach to our operations in Malaysia, and we see that as an important foundation as we continue to run our business. We welcome the comments on ensuring that things are carried out in compliance with international standards, because the international standards with respect to the management of the low-level radioactive waste are quite clear and provided by a number of independent bodies. We see the decision as a perfect example of the Malaysian government putting the interests of Malaysians and our people first. This is about building an industrial base, particularly in Industry 4.0 areas, to support prosperity and development for Malaysian people. And we will continue to work closely with the Malaysian government to develop further the rare earths industry in Malaysia. We were particularly pleased with some of the comments that were reported from our local community leaders. They articulated very clearly the benefits from Lynas, and they also indicated that they understand very clearly the difference between the scare campaigns and the real effects of Lynas within their communities, including the fact that it is their sons, daughters, husbands, wives and neighbours who are working within the Lynas business and benefiting from it. They further talk to the fact that they trust the experts and their own experiences that there is not a problem with pollution or degradation in the local environment. Whilst there are some elements to this, including the cessation of R&D on Condi soil, which we do not see as being necessarily the best approach, we remain committed to R&D in all parts of our business, to always be improving our processes, to always be improving our flow sheet, and to be developing new and helpful products both domestically and internationally. So I think all of you will have read our announcement this morning, so I won't talk for much longer because I don't need to read it to you all over again. But I would just summarise by saying that we are pleased with the announcement, which gives us a clear pathway to continuing our operations, that we are very pleased because it provides confidence and certainty for our people, for our customers, our communities, and of course, importantly, our shareholders. And we are very pleased also that it supports Malaysia and the important role that Malaysia has on the world stage as the only rare earth centre of excellence outside China. So with those sort of few introductory words, I'm very happy to take any questions.
Our first question comes from the line of Dylan Kelly from O'Reilly Minute. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Amanda. Firstly, congratulations. It must come as a tremendous relief last night. Two questions from me. First of all, I want to drill into what happens in 6 months. Is this a case of saying the renewal process goes back to the regulator and it's a business as usual, or is this renewal process still in the realm of the politicians having their say or taking control of this somehow? And my second question is to do with the PDF site selection. I think there's a bit of confusion or mixed reports as to exactly which sites that you've identified and to what extent that has been progressed. Could you just clarify exactly what that state is right now and how that relates to what the regulator and the state have already approved? Thanks.
Sure. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Dylan. And yes, it was a matter of some relief when this came through yesterday evening. So the first thing, what happens in 6 months? So our understanding is that it is we do need to apply for a renewal of the licence at that time on the basis that we have met the conditions. However, it will be an administrative process. It won't be as, say, for example, the process that we've got that we normally go through with a licence renewal, where there's significant documentation and otherwise that needs to be lodged and reviewed and an audit and all of those sorts of things. So that's why I say that the effect of really it being 6 months versus it being, say, 3 years with a 6-month condition is effectively the same. Will the politicians still have a say? We're very hopeful that this sees, sort of a significant lessening in the politicisation of Lynas, because it is a science-based decision. It does actually take the work that was done under the Pakistan Harapan government with the Executive Review Committee. It puts that front and centre, and so therefore it's reflecting a science-based approach. However, politics is politics, and I won't be surprised if we've still got a little bit of politicking and going on, but I think that this is a strong indication of a disciplined science-based approach to the decisions related to the regulation of Lynas. In terms of the second point on the PDF, as we have indicated in the statement, we have already completed significant work related to the PDF planning framework and also the site selection plan. So when we talk about that, we talk about having already defined what are the characteristics that would make a site appropriate for a PDF. We have had that in train for a very long time. That has been discussed, on several occasions over many years with certainly with the local government, the local state government, and also with other regulators. Our team has been working on this with local landowners as well as with, sort of the state government where relevant. And so we have a number of sites that we think are candidates because they meet the conditions which have already been approved as part of the site selection process. And now we will accelerate that process of engaging with all the relevant regulatory bodies.
Okay, so can you just clarify on that final point around the fact that you've been given pre-approval? So what are the layers of approval that you have to go through in order to secure that? Could you just walk us through those steps and how potentially long that may take at each?
So this morning, our Prof Ismail is following this up with the AELB in particular, so that we get absolute clarity on exactly which gates we need to get through within the 6 months. But the first is certainly that we need to engage directly with the state government, and we have certainly been undertaking ongoing briefings with the state government, but we need to engage directly with the state government on any of the identified sites, and we need to move through that process so they understand the form that the PDF would take, and then can provide us with the updated specific approval for use of that site.
Okay, so in terms of naming and pointing to a certain location, why the hesitation to not appoint that at this point, Amanda?
Oh, because we haven't finished the consultation. It's as simple as that's all, Dylan.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. I'll move on to the next questions from Kathy Moises from Patterson's. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Amanda, and congratulations. Terrific news. A couple of questions from me. The first one is your next 25 timeline. This is bringing that forward a couple of years to meet the 4-year criteria. And the other question is that doable within that time frame, or is that putting pressure? And the second one is with your next expansion. Is that going to be discussed with the extension in 6 months, or is that being addressed at all now?
Okay, so the 4 years, is it doable? I mean, we've always, right from the beginning, said that we will do the work which is required to move this the cracking and leaching to WA as quickly as possible. It makes sense. Once we've made the decision, it makes sense to do it as quickly as we can do it. And we have a team which is dedicated to this already. So we're not phased by the 4-year timeline. We have active support from the West Australian and the Australian governments to continue to develop, the value-added processing in Australia, and we see that as being very positive. Australia has very well-constructed guidelines with respect to management of this type of operation and also management of the residues from this type of processing. So we're not fazed by the 4-year timeline with respect to the cracking and leaching. We know that rare earths always have their challenges, so but it's always a case of how long is a piece of string with most things that you do. If you give yourself 2 years, you'll do it in 2 years. If you give yourself 10 years, it'll probably take you 10 years. So we're comfortable with the 4 years. With respect to the expanded production volumes associated with NEXT, that is not a specific item that has been dealt with in this announcement, and so we do still have a challenge ahead of us as far as the volumes that we will be able to produce this year. Having said that, on the other hand, we're comfortable with the fact that we can produce what we need to be satisfying the market, and not, we will continue our strategy, which we've now had in place for several months, of not making sales into the China market, and we see that as being beneficial, particularly whilst the market demand there is quite soft. So we will, now that we have clarity on this, re-engage, and also on the NUF, re-engage with the DOE, bearing in mind, remember, that we already have AELB approval for the uplift in processing, and it's the matching approval from the DOE that we require.
Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for the questions. Next question comes from the line of Daniel Morgan from UBS. Please go ahead.
Hi, Amanda. I just wanted to follow up on moving cracking and leaching to Australia. I mean, you've got 2 sites that you've potentially been looking at, which was Mount Weld, where you're mining, and potentially Kalgoorlie. Just wondering how the narrowing that down to 1 site is going, when we might hear about that, and that's the first question.
Okay, all right. So we are very well progressed in our assessment on this. We've had the project team actually visit both sites. We have engaged with the local governments in each location. We've made significant progress on understanding not just the capital, but also the operating costs and the relative strengths of the 2 different locations. The Lynas board meets in a couple of weeks' time, and I won't be making any announcements ahead of actually providing all of that detail to the Lynas board. But we've indicated before that we certainly expected that we would be making this announcement before the end of this calendar year. I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to bring that date forward.
Right, and then my next question relates to what task is on the critical path to getting this done within 4 years. I'd imagine approvals is probably the key thing in WA and federally.
I think that there are certain things that we can operate. Sorry, I would like to be able to give you a very simple answer to that critical path question. But it's not really possible to do that because, there are many parallel pieces of work that we're engaged with here. And, not the least of which is ensuring that we've got not just optimized, but if possible, sort of next generation thinking around the cracking process. certainly approvals are a critical part in their own way, but we don't actually have to sit here and wait for all of the approvals before we do all of the other work which is required. So we are engaged on each of the parallel strains of work which is associated with the cracking and leaching transition.
Okay, appreciate that. And then the deposits that you've made to date on the AELB is, a significant amount of money. Can you just clarify how that might be or might not be utilised in a permanent disposal facility?
So we'll work through that with the regulator. However, those deposits have always been classified as a portion of them being available for the long-term management of the residue, and so therefore we would expect that the proportion which is relevant to that would be made available. Whether that's by virtue of being made available as we're doing the work, or whether it's by a refund once the work has been demonstrated, that will be the work that we go through with the regulator now.
Right, and then last question, point of clarification: the 0.5% of sales levy. My reading of what's been announced by yourselves and the government is, it sounds like you're redirecting R&D spend towards a government levy, so it's not a financial impact for the company. It's just a redirection. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah. At present, we're required to spend 0.5% of our revenue on R&D, and we have always met and indeed usually exceeded that amount of money. And so this is simply a redirection of that, and I think it's important to note that it is as security. It's not just a gift, or I saw it described as a tax. I mean, it's additional security through this period of time.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions, and I'll leave others to have a chance.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. We have a question from the line of Andrew White from Curran & Co. Please go ahead.
Hi there, Amanda. A question on, I'm just wondering if you're able to meet the demands of the AELB and the Cabinet in terms of identifying a PDF site and also expediting the progress on the cracking and leaching. Are you able to get a licence renewal earlier than the 6 months? Is that able to be brought forward, or do we have to wait for the 6 months period to be up?
Andrew, I'm not certain of the answer to that. It was a question that I asked the team about an hour or so ago, so we don't know that at this time.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you for the questions. Next question comes from the line of Matthew Chen from Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Please go ahead.
Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Good, thanks, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I wanted to ask, about the conditions that that you need to fulfill during that initial period of 6 months. So I just want to clarify a couple of things. I note that you use the word initial, but also that do those conditions technically attach to the current renewal or to a future renewal? And is it right to read it as the satisfaction of those three conditions is enough to achieve future renewal? And what sort of power does the AELB have to vary or attach new preconditions to your future future submission? Because I noticed that you've talked about that future submission in 6 months' time being an administrative process. as distinct from the one that you've just gone through. If you could just clarify those couple of things, please.
So I can tell you what our understanding of this is, and once again, we continue to engage directly with the AELB, and one of the crucial matters is, and it is an administrative process between now and the 2nd of September to actually get the license, so there are things that we have to do, like pay fees and do all of those sorts of things. Yep. In that instance, it will be, what we've got here is a release. What we're working on is making sure that we have the detailed license described. So our understanding of it from all of our interactions is that this is meeting these conditions will be what is attached to the future renewal at the 6-month period. And what power does the AELB have to vary the conditions? Well, Andrew, did you want to talk to that specifically? I think we, just as a framework, I'd say that there is Atomic Energy Licensing Act within which the AELB operates.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I think you dealt with it mostly when you answered Dylan's question earlier. We think that this announcement does provide the clear framework for the next renewal of the licence, i.e. the one to occur in 6 months' time, which we've described as an administrative process. So we expect this to be the basis for the renewal in 6 months' time. I mean, as you mentioned when we were speaking with Dylan a moment ago, clearly there is, as we go forward, capacity for there to be additional discussions with the regulator and potentially variations to the licence in the future. But as we stand today, we see this as a clear framework for the future regulation of the business.
And I think that I would say that the Atomic Energy and Licensing Act does also support that framework, and that's what the regulator operates within the Act. Okay.
No, that sounds very positive if that's the case. So, the less that sort of the goalposts move, the better. Can I ask, is there an expiry to the previously granted approval by the AELB for, the Pahang State Government written approval for the location of the PDF? Is there anything there that can be varied, or is that something that you can rely on?
We believe we can rely on it.
Yeah, okay. All right. No, thanks for that.
We got another questions from the line of Michael Evans from Acova Capital. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Amanda, and congratulations. I've got a couple of follow-up questions, I suppose, on Dylan's comments originally. On the PDF, you've identified a few suitable sites. I would have thought that if to get full consent within 6 months, you would have had to have identified this site. I mean, in other jurisdictions, once the site is identified for something like that, there can be quite lengthy environmental impact statements, etc., far exceeding sort of 6 months. So how do we get more comfort? You said you're very confident you can meet that condition. Can you give us more comfort on the process and how you can meet that condition? And that's the first question. And secondly, just on the US $42 million bond, you said a portion of that is allocated to the PDF. What proportion is that? Is it like half, 25%, 75%? And what's the rest of it allocated for?
Okay. The second question is very simple. It doesn't actually put specific percentages on it. The AELB bond is a combination of rehabilitation of those elements of the site which have been affected by radioactivity. So, for example, if we were talking about decommissioning the plant, there is only a small part of the plant where there will be any radioactive effect. So part of it is about rehab and decommissioning, and the other part is about residue management. So we have quite detailed within our accounts and have had the work done on the costs of rehab, site rehab, both here and of course at Mount Weld. And so there's a structure of those things, and so it's the relatively smaller proportion of that bond which is specifically related to the radioactive element of our operations. The larger site rehab, of course, is part of our normal business planning. In terms of the PDF, sorry, go on.
Just on that thing, so maybe I'll ask it another way. If the PDF costs, I don't know, 10 or 20 million, do you expect you'll be able to use 5 of that bond, or 20, or the 100% of the cost of the PDF to allocate towards that bond, or is Lynas going to be writing another cheque for that PDF? Or you don't know?
Look, I don't know that exactly. It will be a matter that we will discuss with the regulator. I think that what's going to be important is to be able to evidence that there is sufficient monies in the bond for any decommissioning or rehab requirements. And bear in mind that we currently spend, as part of our stay in business capital, a significant portion of that is actually the ongoing management of the residues, including the construction of new residue storage facilities. And so that money will be available if we're no longer building those, but actually constructing the PDF, the money will be available for that purpose.
Okay, thanks. And
so in terms of the identified sites, I'm sure that there are many who would like us to sort of say today, well, yes, the site is going to be X, Y, Z. As with all of these things, and I think, I've said this to you over the last while, there are certain things that we need to undertake diligently in terms of proper briefings and engagement with all of the various different regulators and governments, and we are going through that process. And once we have been through that process, then we will make proper announcements at the appropriate time.
But, I mean, are you not concerned that factors outside of your control might, really put some stress on that 6-month deadline for that PDF consent?
Michael, my life every day I have to deal with factors which are outside of my control. But, we work through it on a diligent basis. We do the work which is required ethically and legally, and we do that with confidence that we will get the right outcome. And that's exactly what we've just done. In terms of, we've had 8 months of dealing with one particular issue. We're now in a position where we've got a very clear path forward, and we have confidence that we will be able to continue to engage properly with the relevant authorities.
Okay. Thanks very much, Amanda, for your time. I appreciate it.
I wish I controlled everybody else in the world some days, Michael, but I don't. So,
I know
what? So we will just do the work diligently and appropriately.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I'll round out by saying that we're very pleased that we're on a clear pathway and that we have the opportunity to continue to build value in our business. Thanks all for joining us.